This edition of Green Rush Live is supported by Canna Business Resources, helping you grow with Canna Business funding. Check them out at cannabusinessresources.com. Thank goodness it is Friday afternoon. Hi, everybody. It's another edition of the really live Green Rush Live Business of Cannabis talk show on Pro Cannabis Media. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. And, you know, every third Friday of every month, Morgan Fox, formerly of NCIA, now of Normal, has been a regular on our program. Unfortunately, he's also, well, maybe let me rephrase that. Fortunately, he's also a proud dad, and he's got two sick kids at home. So needless to say, he has opted out of today's interview at the last moment. So we totally understand that. And anyone who has been a parent certainly knows that the kids always come first. Thankfully, we are always happy to reach into our bag of tricks and find other interesting interview people that we can talk to. One is a regular on our show. He is the founder of NECANN, the New England Cannabis Convention, and Marc Shepard joins us here at the top of Green Rush Live today. Hi, Marc, how are you?
I'm doing great, Jimmy. Always great, and I'm always ready to be your backup, you know, your second choice.
Second fiddle, as it were. Hey, number two in the lineup, but never not number one in the heart, Marc. Okay, come on. It all started with your show in 2018, and I always give you credit for that. So there you go. Hey, you're coming off a show in Atlantic City a week ago. How did that go? And were you happy with the results? Because I was at the first one, I'm pretty sure, for you. This was the second time around, I believe, in Atlantic City for you. Am I right?
It's actually third.
I had a feeling I was wrong.
Yeah, no worries. But it was actually fantastic. Our program director, Beth Waterfall, did an amazing job putting together some incredibly timely and relevant programming for, you know, New Jersey residents and license holders. Actually, three people at the show while they were in sessions got text to announce that they were awarded, you know, provisionary licenses. So the timing was really great. The crowd was terrific. By far the biggest B2B event, I would say, you know, ever in the New Jersey state. And yeah, we were really thrilled. It was just a great event.
Talk a little bit about the challenges when you go back to a venue that you've been at for a couple of times, but every year, I'm going to guess the competitor inside of you wants to always have more vendors, better speakers, always looking to improve the experience for those who attend. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a kind of a unique thing. Like if you're in the trade show industry, you know, it's pretty cut and dried. It's like, okay, you know, we've got all the people that we had last year, get them all re-signed right away. And how do we get 10% higher and everything? In cannabis, it's really impossible. You know, you're held by the market. If the market doesn't expand, you're not going to expand. And you know, even if you're doing a good job in this industry, you're faced with the fact that maybe 40% of your exhibitors will be out of business a year from now. So it's a nonstop evolving, you know, just process. But yeah, we're always looking. You know, if we're not growing in a market, we're probably going to leave the market because, you know, we're there because we feel we're needed. And if the show isn't growing, you know, we're probably not necessary. So it's something we definitely look at very closely.
What's the sense that you have of the cannabis industry? You made a comment just now about how, you know, they're here now, but, you know, 40% later, you know, they're not. And there seems to be not a doom and gloom, but certainly a reality check going on in the business right now. How are you finding the flow and support of vendors that you reach out to join your convention?
You know, I actually think it's a sign of great health in the industry, because what's happening is you're getting people that still aren't having much trouble. You know, I have an idea, or I have a will, or I just want to jump in, and they're not having trouble coming to market with capital to do a show. And you know, and that's the unfortunate part. You're like, hey, somebody just jumps in. Hey, I'm going to be a CBD white label guy. No problem getting their, you know, friends and angel investors and everybody to invest. And then they pop into the show and, they spend all their marketing budget, big launch, and then they realize, wow, I don't know what I'm doing and I'm going to get creamed. And, it's unfortunate to see that. But at the same time, when I say 40% of those people leave, and that's true, for everyone that goes out of business, it feels like 3 more take their place. And that's, we see it in the event industry. And I know you see it, Jimmy. If you wanted to, you could be broadcasting live from a different cannabis convention 90, 100 times a year. And we're not all going to survive. All those events, that it's not sustainable. But people are like, wow, what an opportunity, low barrier of entry. So people just keep jumping in.
Yeah, and there's still an excitement and a buzz amongst those that are in the industry. A lot of people are very passionate about the cause, and that lends itself a little bit to what we're going to be talking about later on Green Rush Live, when we talk about socially responsible capitalism that is alive and well in the cannabis space. Even though, Marc, you and I both know that there seems to be that first wave of a money grab and everybody wants to get in. But now what we're seeing is this is like any other industry, early industry growth, if you will.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it attracts an incredible amount of money. And that's, something people just have to deal with. I'm like, when you're talking about, the equivalent of a tomato selling for $400 an ounce, how are you not going to attract big money? Like, why wouldn't they come? Yeah. So there just becomes a lot of confusion at the beginning because there's so many people just jumping in. And, a lot of the people who, suffered under cannabis prohibition or, been growers a long time or have done jail time, there's going to be a natural resentment there for the people that are like, oh, it's legal now I'm going to jump in. But at the same time, I mean, it's human nature. It can't not happen.
Yeah. What's your feeling about the acceptance now? Are we getting any closer to normalization out in the real world? Because, when I go to a trade show, it's like a completely different universe than the real world, right? I mean, you're surrounded with like-minded people, passionate people about the cause, but then you step outside that convention hall and people are like looking at you and smelling that, oh, I smell that weed thing. I mean, it's still out there, that stigma, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And like you said, we live in an echo chamber in our business. I mean, I only talk to people who have, it's normalized in their life, but I live in the town I grew up in. So, and I moved away for a while, but now I'm back. I've been doing this for 8 years. There's a website, there's all the information. I mean, it's pretty out there. And I still regularly run into people that kind of like, if they ask me my job, whatever, all of a sudden it's a whisper, like I'm like, oh yeah, like you're in the mob, something like that. And they're literally like, so what do you do? So do you sell it at the show? Like, I'm just like, yeah, there's just still such a taboo and mystery to, again, people who it's not part of their daily life and they're not following the news of it. We've got a ways to go.
Right. And again, I think my background too. It's one of the reasons why I started this thing, to give the industry a voice, and perhaps also those who are curious about what's going to happen in the future with this plant medicine and how it might affect everyone, and where and how the normalization does take place is still something we all deal with on a regular basis. And I just wonder, when do you think that you'll see television and radio stations understanding their obligation to the people who listen to their content or watch their content to do public service announcements that perhaps educate those that are still curious, but they're not subscribers to Pro Cannabis Media or going to the New England Cannabis Convention or subscribing to any of the million newsletters that are out there? How are we ever going to break down that stigma? Are we all charged with it wherever we go, is to say, hey, look, I'm in the cannabis industry. This is legit. It's here to stay. Get used to it.
I mean, that's probably, the path to take. I mean, the biggest hurdle is, if you take any other industry, if you just take, I mean, just imagine like a restaurant, okay? Like, so Massachusetts has made restaurants legal, but federally it's against the law to have a restaurant. How do you normalize it? As silly as it sounds, by the letter of the law, the feds could raid a dispensary in Massachusetts and haul everybody away. You're breaking federal law. We all know it's a huge thing that we shouldn't just gloss over, that we all know that's not going to happen. But when you look at the different business types, like say banking, where they're paid and they win by not taking risk, and they're federally insured, so they're not going to jump in, because why would they? There's just the risk doesn't make sense because it's federally against the law, and that's probably what it's going to take. It's not a perfect analogy, but we saw sort of a similar struggle. I probably mentioned this before with gay marriage, where it's all well and good, but until the country says yes, America supports it, there's a stigma. We even see now that's still, people still fight against that, even though gay marriage has been normalized.
Right, and hopefully here to stay, because as we've seen, even our one of our branches of the government that's not supposed to be politicized, and I'm talking about the Supreme Court, has become politicized. And this is the first time in my lifetime that I've really felt unsure of what's going to happen in the future as far as our government and the direction of our country. And I don't want to get into politics, Mark, so we'll revert right back to talking about the weed business. I do want to ask you about your upcoming convention in Portland, Maine, which is kind of my second home, since I spent 11 years at the CBS affiliated up there from 1981 to 1992. And I know it has a soft spot in your heart as well, Portland.
Yeah, I had the same experience. I was in media in Portland for 15 years. My kids were born there, and my two kind of most key and long running employees both live in Portland. Just such a great city and such a great environment, and it really is. That's one of those things. I'm doing this, Jimmy, so that I can retire and move back up to Portland. That's sort of the plan.
The way life should be. I think I've heard that somewhere, right?
As my brothers used to say, the way life should be until Marc moved up there. But I don't think that's true. But we're doing our main convention next weekend. It's our 8th year there. We missed 1 year during COVID, but it was our second show. We launched right after Boston. It was always part of my original plan when we launched one in Boston. I was like, we're going to do Maine as well, having been up there for so long and knowing it. It's definitely my favorite event of all of our events. Maine's a home grow state, tons of caregivers, tons of home growers, very, very educated craft cultivators up there. I actually know many people, mostly north of Boston, that drive to Maine to buy their cannabis, which is phenomenal.
Wait, that's interstate commerce, Mark, isn't that? Oh, wait, it is legal now because you can have a medical card in Maine. They recognize those, right?
Yeah, and they can, you can buy recreationally. I assume everybody's just consuming it in Maine and not carrying it through New Hampshire and bringing it home, because that would be illegal. So
I won't tell if you won't tell. How's that?
Sure.
Fair enough. Hey, what is it about the state of Maine? I've heard. In fact, Uncle Pete, I'm sure you know Uncle Pete Transpontaine from Sanford. He's actually, I know he was on one of your panels a few years back. They say it's the water that makes their cannabis so much more pure and a better experience. Do you have any insight on that?
I mean, I don't know if that's scientifically true. I do know that when I lived in Maine, it was pretty amazing to have, basically Poland Springs bottled water coming out of your tap. It was out of the same aquifer. The Sevago Basin is where Poland Springs come from. So I wouldn't doubt that. I just think Maine, and much like Vermont, there's just very strong agricultural roots there. I would assume all the way back to when it was like, you better grow some food because winter comes. You don't know. And I always just found that farmers up there, you've got to be good. If you're living off farming, in that region, you're good at it. So when it came to the cannabis, I assume it was. And then there's always just that sort of, in Maine, I always found, there's a very wide range of beliefs, but it was live and let live. And, there was very little judgment. It was like, not for me, but that's my neighbor's business, not my business. So I think there's just been a long tradition of growing there.
Yeah, July and winter are the seasons in Maine. Isn't that the joke, right? July and winter. Tell us a little bit about some of the programs. I'm sure Beth at Waterfall has been very busy putting together great educational programs and panels for you. You got any previews for us?
The funny thing is it's the only show Beth doesn't do for us. So because we've got two guys that live up there, and one of them's a grower. So yeah, we're going to do some focusing on genetics and how different genetics are either good or not so great for Maine soil. We've got sort of the usual rundowns of state of the industry legally. What are the regs coming up? What are the changes coming up? There's been some legal battles on out of state ownership of licensing that's being hotly contested and sued back and forth. And really, yeah, it's a lot more homegrown education in Maine than in the other states, because I just think it's a bigger component.
There you go. And Lord knows, I've learned quite a bit about growing and genetics over the last few years and during my various interviews that I've done and what have you. It is fascinating to me, the impact of science on this plant medicine and how you really can dictate the effect that, or let me rephrase that, the desired effect that you might have on others with this plant. To me, I don't know about you, but I was not a big science guy. I probably talked more about science in the last 2 or 3 years than I have in my entire life. How do you view this whole genetic seed thing as far as like the amount of knowledge that you can gain and how they can dictate the direction of this plant?
I mean, it's really fascinating because it's just so unique. And, people always try to make analogies to alcohol, because they're socially and recreationally used for consumption. But, just try to imagine, if you could craft vodka 40 different ways to have a different effect on you. It's really an incredible uniqueness, the genetic process in cannabis. And it's also, one of the most competitive and really, the people who are in it are so passionate, because there's so much legacy and really and money at stake in being able to control genetics. So I think it's an incredibly unique aspect of the industry, talking about like who's got the ownership of strains, and then just the ability for people to craft forever. You can always be crafting a new strain, coming up with something unique, something new, the flavors, the odors, the effects, the taste. It's fascinating.
Yeah, fascinating is the word that I keep hearing over and over again. I use it a lot when I talk to people about this industry and what it's like. And there are so many different avenues to take. It touches everything. Needless to say, it's in the middle of the political debate right now too, which we're not going to talk about. But the point is, it affects every aspect of our world now, and even my beloved sports world. You're seeing more and more former professional athletes getting into the business, trying to give opportunities to those who have been most impacted by the failed war on drugs. They have access to capital. A guy like Chris Webber comes to mind immediately. So the future, I think, again, continues to be bright, but it's like, go in with your eyes open, right, Mark? I mean, that's really the best way to look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's the opportunities coming. You've got to be patient. You've got to have a thick skin. But just like the old cliche, once a progressive cause starts moving forward, it never goes backwards. You can take backward steps, but it never goes all the way back.
Right.
And so we just have to be diligent and push the envelope, but realize that things just take time.
Yeah, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I think that's the mantra of a lot of industry in cannabis. How do we get in? It's open to the public. Give us the dates, where it's going to be. I know, but let the
sure.
world know.
It's at the Portland Sports Dome, or the Portland Sports Complex, whatever you want to call it. Turf Sports Bar is there as well. It's Warren Ave, right on the border of Portland and Westbrook. It's a great venue because it's an indoor soccer field, so you've got the green carpet to go with it. It's a private area, so that parking lot in the area, it's consumption friendly outside. Obviously, selling isn't legal. It's this weekend, which I'm trying to look at my calendar. It's the 24th and 25th, and it is open to the public. It's just $20 to get in, $35 for 2 days. Parking's free. It's just a great atmosphere. Even if you're not in the industry, just from a social experience and just kind of seeing the people, you'll come away. I always tell people, I'm like, come to this event and compare it to the crowd at any other kind of industry event, whatever, and you'll just see just how unique it is, how kind people are, how welcoming they are, how generous they are with their education and time and knowledge. It's just such an amazing community to be a part of.
That's the great state of Maine. That's Marc Shepard from NECANN. Hey, what are the hours on Friday and Saturday?
10 to 5 on, it's actually Saturday, Sunday, and it's 10 to 5 Saturday, 10 to 4 Sunday.
Okay, so Saturday and Sunday in Portland, Maine. It's next weekend. Check it out. You can go on to the NECANN website and get your tickets, or you can walk up at the door. Am I right, Marc?
You are so right.
All right, well, there you go. There's Marc Shepard from NECANN. He'll be in Portland, Maine. So will Pro Cannabis Media next weekend. I promise you that. In the meantime, we're going to take our first break here on Green Rush Live. It's time for Shanty. It's just about 4:20 on a Friday afternoon. I mean, come on. When we come back, Josh Kincaid will join me, and we'll continue with Green Rush Live after this.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just... like every other night, just gonna lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. gonna sit down in my rented car. I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on every night and day. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God Jonathan Edwards is joining us live in the WSCA studios.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. We're here every single Friday from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern to talk about the business of cannabis. And I have a kind of a nice announcement to mention. This is actually the beginning of our third year of this program. That's right. We started back 2 years ago with David Rabinovitz as my co-host. Some of you guys on this panel might remember him. And we've been going now for almost every single Friday over the last 2 years. And now we start our third year. And obviously we appreciate everyone tuning in, liking, sharing, subscribing, and all that neat stuff that we ask our audience to take part in. We have two guests in our Zoom room, in our chat room tonight, or today, actually. One is someone who probably doesn't need much introduction in the cannabis world. His name is Blake Mensing. He's a very accomplished attorney, friend, entrepreneur, parent, the whole nine yards. How are you, Blake?
I am well. Thanks for that intro.
Sure, happy to do that. And of course, another gentleman who may not need much of an introduction, especially in the north, and I don't even know if I call Haverhill and Amesbury the North Shore, Scott. Is that considered the North Shore?
It is. Haverhill, and they're both part of the Merrimack Valley as well, but you can't get any farther north than we are, so we're definitely the North Shore.
There you go. You're certainly in the north part of Massachusetts. Scott Winters from CNA Stores. Hey, guys, when we kicked around ideas for this particular show, I really wanted to find people who understood the importance of socially responsible capitalism, because in the cannabis space, you know, you hear a lot about these big multi-state operators, and everybody loves to take shots at the multi-state operator. You know, they're the ones that are acquiring little people and then expanding and taking up more space and more space. Anyway, the bottom line is there is room to be a good business person and still do the right thing for those who have been most impacted on the failed war on drugs. Now, Scott, you are a veteran. I know recently that I think it was North Shore Magazine that did a feature on you guys. You embrace the idea of giving back to the community as someone who's in the cannabis business, right?
We do, Jimmy. And Jimmy, thanks for having us. I want to start off. I am not one of our veterans.
Okay, sorry.
I always tell people, oh, it's okay. People do it all the time.
You do what the veterans tell you to do.
Yeah, pretty much. I always tell people I'm a veteran of the cannabis wars. We are veteran owned, and 30% of us are veterans. When we open to cultivation this time next year, we're hoping to be at 50% veterans. I'm sorry, what was the question again?
How important it is to, oh, look, who else is joining us now? How important it is to, you could still be a successful capitalist and give back to the community, and also make it easier for those who have been most impacted by the war on drugs to get into this business, right?
Yeah, I think those two go hand in hand. I think some of the companies, excluding, pull away from the cannabis space, some of the local businesses that have been around for 40 some odd years are the ones that have that reputation of giving back. We have a local hardware store that has donated land and buildings to our local food pantry and our local museum. We all can shop in, New Hampshire's 2 minutes from my house. We could all go to the big box stores, but we choose not to We choose to support this business because they support the community. And I think that's just it's just a smart business practice in general. So I think those two should coexist. I think if you're building your business for that type of longevity, I don't think there's another way of doing it, honestly. So, and none of my team feel that that there's another way of doing business. So we work really hard to do that.
That's great. And I know Blake Mensing buys into that whole mantra, because I'm pretty sure, I don't know if I can officially say this, Blake, but pretty soon we'll see another dispensary in Boston in a great location, right?
That's right. So at the end of July, the Boston Cannabis Board gave one of my companies the green light for a host community agreement for a retail store directly across the street from South Station. I think that is, obviously the location spoke for itself. Why wouldn't we want to be across the street from a building that sees 70 to 80,000 people go through it a day?
Yeah.
So like, many people in the space, the first domino that needs to fall is real estate. You need to have an address on your application when you're going through, the various steps in the process. We happen to find a ridiculously primo piece of real estate. And we sort of had a little bit of trouble dealing with the fact that the landlord required us to rent 2 floors. We thought, well, what the heck are we going to do with 2 floors? We don't need 6,500 square feet of retail. It's not necessary. So what we did is we are dedicating the 2nd floor, which is right now just essentially office space, to any nonprofit with a restorative social justice focus to use for events, trainings, etc. We're going to be doing our own periodic expungement and record sealing clinics. And in addition, we're going to be offering nominally priced bud tender trainings for anyone who lives in an area of disproportionate impact. So, for $10 or so, we're going to give people the tools they need to make sure that they can comply. And, just getting a little bit of a stamp of approval from, someone like myself who happens to know the regulations really, really well, just making sure people are armed with compliance mindset.
Absolutely. And joining me as my guest host for the rest of the program, it's a gentleman that's been kind of a regular here on Green Rush Live. His name is Josh Kincaid. He hails from Washington State. So once again, Pro Cannabis Media goes coast to coast. Josh, how are you today?
I'm good, Jimmy. Just got back from New York last night, so a little tired, but I'm alive and well.
And you were in New York for a show or just for pleasure?
No, I was there for Finovate. It's a financial innovation conference, but I did make my way around to 17 pot shops, I should say. So I did a little bit of a crawl, but only 2 to report on. So that'll go live next Friday. In New York, I will say this. New York doesn't have a chance in hell to catch California in terms of cannabis sales. I'm going on record saying that. I've seen it. I've been there. A lot of people from New York are like, oh, we're going to be the world's capital. No, you're not. Not even close. And maybe we can go into detail a little bit later, but not even close, New York. Not even close.
Wow. That's a bold prediction. Blake's already going like this. So I see you have some support on that. That's not the scuttlebutt, of course, I hear from New York, because as you know,
right,
they're the biggest state, the biggest media market.
Yeah.
They're the biggest blanks of all time, because I'm from Boston and you know how I feel about New Yorkers. But anyway, I do want to ask Josh a question, because we kind of set this up by talking about the importance of the new person, whether it be the multi-state operator or the mom and pop craft grower, doing the right thing and having a socially responsible capitalist way of doing business. Washington has had it legal for a long time. Are there any initiatives in Washington State, or what's your feeling about the importance of making sure that you give back to the community, making sure that there are opportunities for those who have been most impacted on the failed war on drugs in your state?
Just in general, I'll just say that the social responsible investing, SRI, or the ESG, environmental social governance, has a big backing behind it. So the world of angel investors and novice investors alike like the idea of giving back to the community. So I think that lawmakers are getting behind it. I think individuals are getting behind it. Activists obviously are pushing for it. So there's a time and a place, and I think both of them are now. and it's long overdue. Washington at the 10-year mark is just at the point now where we're starting to get some momentum on that movement, on that front of getting some social equity movement. And so if there's going to be cannabis lounges or the moratorium on licensing for rec stores lifted, the priority will go towards the most impacted individuals from the war on drugs. So I believe that Washington will probably implement that maybe 2023 when they have a little bit more time, and hopefully start implementing that on a small level, even with tier 1 farms. That's like really like less than 10,000 square feet of farms. They might be able to have direct sales, and so helping them in any way, any capacity that they can, is starting to gain momentum and traction in the Washington state market.
Yeah, I think we all talk about it as being the right thing, but I also recognize that it's so difficult to actually be in this business now with all the regulations, all the compliance issues, all the costs, the inability to write off your regular business expenses. Blake, I know that you know all too well what I'm talking about. The margin of profitability in this industry is minuscule in many ways, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Internal Revenue Code Section 280E basically says you're naughty for making money from a controlled substance, but notwithstanding that naughtiness, you got to pay the tax man. And basically what it does is it limits the available deductions to cost of goods sold, which is, as the name implies, what it costs you to make that product is potentially deductible. For a standalone retailer, you're not making the product, you're buying it at wholesale. So your available deductions are virtually nil. There was a recent change in state law in Massachusetts that the governor signed at the end of July here that will decouple the state's tax treatment from the federal 280E. So, old friend David Regennabis calculated that will probably result in about a 2.4% tax relief, for a retailer. Every penny counts. When you look at the numbers, people always focus on the gross revenues. Well, that doesn't matter. You have to pay the tax man. You got to pay your staff. You got to pay, 40 to 50% at wholesale. If you're not self-supplying, as a vertically integrated player, then, you're paying a lot of middlemen. So yeah, I think the way the federal government treats taxation here, honestly, is a perverse incentive for them to drag their feet on federal legalization, because they get more money now by saying this is all, naughty behavior.
Hey, Scott. Yep. You don't have to raise your hand, by the way.
So Blake, we also, we call something the green tax. And I think you alluded to it a little bit with having to rent 2 floors. We've had to do that with facilities and get creative. We did the same thing in Amesbury as we put one of our charities in that second space. But, we've also seen in some of our spots that, the rent is a bit higher. Substantially higher.
It's like going to a reception hall and letting the word wedding slip.
Exactly.
So,
you hire a photographer or a wedding photographer, and
exactly.
And it's a $10,000 cost difference.
Right.
If you looked at the price of rope is really cheap, but if it's a leash for a dog, it's 15x. And I'd say the same thing about real estate in Seattle. It's 15x if you're in cannabis versus anything else.
Right.
How is this industry going to survive with all these regulations? Everybody, it seems, is working against the industry and trying to slow it down so it doesn't, survive, let alone explode. Blake, I know that you understand the challenges of getting into this business. Sure.
I think stated policy rationales for why a law gets created have to be, met. So, I've had the privilege of being out in Seattle and went to a few shops. They charge 39% tax on the retail product. Most states say we want to have this be legal, so you stamp out the illicit market. Why would I pay 40% more for a product that's potentially, at least in Massachusetts, that's frankly not as good as you can get on the illicit market, at least here? I thought the weed was pretty good in Seattle, but that's because they've been doing it a little longer than we have. So yeah, I think you just have to, frankly, get politicians out of the conversation, and that's hard because they're the ones who make the laws. But they often pat themselves on the back for words that don't work in reality. I shudder every time I see a news story that, touts Massachusetts is first in the nation social equity program. Yeah, you set up the program, but you didn't put any money behind it until this recent passage of law.
Right.
The trainings were, largely great, but it's not enough to get someone ready to do it all themselves. And actually, just going back to the South Station project, having had so many meetings with potential investors and economic empowerment and social equity applicants, it always sort of devolved when the person writing the big check would say, well, how can I trust that this one person is going to steer the ship in a way that I can understand? Because it's usually someone they don't know. So the corporate structure I came up with for Boston was with an eye towards getting people in the industry, getting their foot in the door. So we're a majority owned by 6 social equity and economic empowerment applicants. That had regulatory significance. And of course, that's the way I think about everything. Each one owns 8.5% of the store, which means they can then still own 3 brick and mortar retail stores when they try to go somewhere else. So we're arming them with skills, direct experience, and dollars. So when they're at the table the next time with an investor, the investor says, well, how do I know you can do this? And they can say, well, I'm a co-owner and operator of potentially one of the business stores in the state. And I'm bringing my own, war chest of funds to the table and that direct experience. So I truly hope that people copy that model. You're rarely going to hear a lawyer saying, steal my idea, but please replicate it. It hedges the risk for the investor. It helps more people at once. And I do think it's going to be a good stepping stone for them when they try to do their next thing.
Now, we all know that New York is waving the flag saying, well, Massachusetts may have done the first social equity program, but we're going to get it right this time. No, I've already got something in the chat room that's basically saying it's basically a blank show in New York right now. Josh, you just came back. When you said you went to 17 shops, there's no open legal licensed shops in New York yet, right?
Well, no licensed regulated shops, no, because Attain was purchased recently for 250 million for 4 locations. It wasn't open though. It was like the name is there. It looks like it should be open, but it's not open. What they do have are CBD shops selling D8, Delta 8, and knockoff Stizzy. Maybe it's not knockoff. Maybe Stizzy's just out there and they don't care. The Stizzy is all over New York. But it's mostly CBD stores selling illicit products, and the 2 stores that I found were running as like medical shops, so you had to pay a day rate to be able to get in there. Those were the only 2 that allowed me to take photos. The other people were like, no photos, and I knew immediately when they say no photos that it's not a legit shop, right? So
now there are people, I want to tell you that's true, Josh, but here in Massachusetts, I always ask when I go into a dispensary with a camera, does anybody not want to be seen on camera?
That's different.
Right. Okay. Even though we all know that Big Brother's watching every single move in a dispensary, right?
So Jimmy, in Washington, they won't let you take photos of the people because they don't want those individuals to get robbed or to be tracked after hours. And then, so there's that. There's the not getting the face of the people is one thing, but taking pictures of the product is totally different. And, it's a lot like Vancouver, BC in New York right now. Vancouver, BC, you'll see people on the street just selling it and nobody cares. In New York, same thing. It's all over the place. Times Square, they're just selling it in bags. Like, here's a mystery bag. Just buy a box of, a bag of cannabis mystery. Seriously. I was like, what is happening here? This is, I was just puffing on one pre-roll that I got for free. Actually, it's not bad. But for $10 for, maybe half or 3/4 of a gram, never. Nobody is going to pay for that. Nobody.
But that's kind of what you see before the regulation really takes hold. Is you kind of see this gray area.
Yeah.
And a lot of folks can get away with a lot of things in that gray area. A lot of states stayed in that, like, Maine kind of stayed in that area. But they did it, they went to the ballot box and lobbied and voted to put it where it is. But, for years, Maine was in that that gray area.
But to that point, as soon as it becomes regulated, it does correct. And Blake, to your point, prices are crazy high. They're going to all come down. Every market comes down eventually in price and availability. And, in Vancouver, they didn't buy concentrates for the longest time because it was poop soup. It was this black, nasty stuff nobody wanted. And so you're not gonna spend 40% more on something that's trash. And so you have to kind of have this happy medium where taxes aren't too much and the quality isn't too bad, and then people will actually buy your stuff. And so Vancouver is starting to get more sales as prices are coming down. You have that equilibrium, but every new rollout is excessively high in price until reality kicks in.
Gotcha.
Just one quick point on the New York situation. So I think some of those stores are confused by the fact that they might have a registration with the Department of Revenue there to pay taxes. They think, oh, I'm legal, I'm paying taxes on it. Go back to 280E, you're paying taxes on that, but it's very clearly not legal at the federal level. I personally am risk averse in the sense that I would never run a store that was blatantly violative of both federal law and state law, especially when New York's regulations aren't out yet for retailers.
Right.
So for people to take that risk, to me, the real risk is not really, arrest and prosecution. The risk to me is the regulator will have a record of the fact that you jumped the gun. And then when you apply to go legit, they're going to be like, why would I let you? You clearly don't care about following rules.
We've seen that here too in the state with folks that were kind of in that weird area, and then when they came to go get licenses, they were just kind of
right.
If we can't trust you to do the right thing here, how do we trust you to do the right thing here? I think that I was a government official here in Amesbury on the topic for a little while, and that's just part of being communal. I mean, if you're coming to set up a business, being a trustworthy member of the community is part of that. So, yeah.
And what's going on now? I saw a news item this week. The city legislature of New York City is putting pressure on the mayor there to clean up what is going on that you saw, Josh, in real time last week in New York.
Yeah, they have. They impounded, I think, 3 dozen food trucks, but
right.
I took photos of at least 2. And so it's not stopping anybody from doing it.
Well, hey, Blake, I don't know. I'm not going to put you on the spot on this, but I have no idea what the fine is for. I think they got them because they were food trucks. They were operating without a food license, not cannabis license, a food license. And that's what the fine was. And I think I read it was like a few $100s. But if you're making thousands of dollars in your food truck, a few hundred isn't a bad tariff, right?
Cost of doing business.
Right. That's right.
Coming from the environmental law background that I had before I got into cannabis and municipal law, a lot of companies will build in fines as a cost of doing business. I don't want to change my behavior, and it's cheaper for me to pay that fine and take the slap on the wrist. And speaking of slaps on the wrist, there was an enforcement matter discussed at yesterday's Cannabis Control Commission here in Massachusetts, and it was a pattern of basically a year-long worth of violations. No fine, no threat of rescission of the license. They're putting them on sort of double secret probation, and it's like, wow, what does someone have to do to get their license yanked? And I don't want anyone to lose their license, but taking the listed facts at face value. Boy, did they make a lot of mistakes. I think it was something like 160 bags of weed that didn't have a metric tag on it. That's basic compliance. You can't just have weed in a licensed facility and not know where it's coming from or where it's going.
I thought that was the whole reason why they wanted to go legit, right? Isn't that the idea? We want to actually know what product we're getting when we go in the store. I mean, Scott, you run a store. I'm guessing when people come in, are they relieved to see, oh, I get this is where this came from. Oh, this has this in it. Oh, okay. I'm guessing that they enjoy that process at this point.
So we're 11 miles from the coast of Maine that has zero testing regulatory, nothing. So I hear it a lot. The reason why people, will shop here, it's 20-minute drive, right? It's not that big of a deal to go up that way, but people will stay shopping here because the product is tested. And, we can debate, at the farmer level, what parts per million are, but having that sense of safety in the product, and it's made it harder for growers to get that quality, as we talked about earlier, Blake, to get that quality up to a place that we're used to, because we've had to learn new grow techniques and just kind of be, without the use of pesticides and such. I think people appreciate that, and we see that. I mean, we're in two border communities here, one in Haverhill and one in Amesbury, and people will shop with us because of the testing. I think a lot of people shop with us too because they respect what we're doing locally. We hear a lot of that as well, as that we love what you're doing, and I think, as a marketer, that's where I want to be. That's where we as a company really want to establish ourselves. Is we're consumers, so we carry a pretty decent selection of Massachusetts product. We're also, as far as services, one of the only in the state. There's a few now, but we kind of started doing deli before really anybody else was doing deli. And so it's just an added service, and then our long list of philanthropic accomplishments that nobody has matched, right? And so a lot of the people in the communities that Amesbury, Salisbury, Newburyport. I was out on Plum Island today. That's what people say is, we love what you're doing for the community, and that's what keeps people coming back.
Yeah, I think you're in a very friendly area, because there are some pockets in this state now with, 240 plus dispensaries that are under the gun. First of all, the competition among every dispensary now has gotten much more fierce. Scott, have you felt any of the other retail pressure, or have you got yourself pretty well established at this point in your area?
There's two things here. First of all, we are established. Second of all, with the cultivation site coming on next year, we're not looking at our neighbors as competitors. We'll have our product on their shelves. And so, I think that's one of the things that Massachusetts has done right. They've done plenty right, so don't get me wrong there. But, the fact that we can only own 3 stores, right? The uber capitalists will criticize me, including on my own team. But the fact that we can only own 3 stores keeps us all talking. It keeps us all collaborative. I mean, if I want to get product in the western part of the state or the southern part of the state, we have to have friends. We have to have relationships. And so I don't look at that competition the same way. I think some of the healthy stuff we see with pricing and services and raising the bar philanthropically, I think those are healthy. The same thing at the cultivation side, where it's like, look at what my dosey does testing that, or ooh, that smells. Does yours smell that good? I think those are all healthy, competitive pieces that we all look forward to in the market. Is that we look forward to meeting at the Cultivator Cup or the Harvest Cup and comparing notes and going back to our team with that little healthy bit of competition. But other than that, I think for the vertically integrated folks, I think it's different than it is for single license holders. So if you just have a retail, or if you just have a cultivation, and I was just talking with a new wholesaler today about the same, is that we don't have the same arguments. We don't have the same outlook. We don't look at our neighbors as competitors, because again, we're looking to get our product on their shelves as well.
I also think there's different lanes of competition you can enter, right? I mean, the MSOs are going to have a death grip on lowest price per unit. They just will, because they spend money to scale up and automate. I just personally think, I call that sort of the fat middle of the market. That's what I would classify as, the Bud Light of weed. Lots of people like it and enjoy it, and they like the price. I'd say objectively, it's not as good as smaller batch products, because people spend more time per plant. So, the sweatshirt I'm wearing now, Coyote Cannabis Company, I started that because I bought rosin from a store, brought it home, and it was categorically not rosin. Like, you can't call what they sold me rosin, and that made me so mad that I started a company about it. So the goal there is not to fight with the people who are going to, look at me like a bad business person by leaving a couple nickels and dimes on the table. They're going to say your labor cost is too high. And to that, I respond, your product isn't good enough for me to consume. So you can win at the boardroom level, and I'm going to win by making something that I actually want to consume myself.
Are we at saturation in Massachusetts, Blake? I'm going to ask you that because I know you're going to open your doors at a great location in a little while. But when are we going to have too many dispensaries?
Sure. Like you said, we have about 240 open today. 351 municipalities throughout the state. We've got almost 7 million people in the state. 21% of our population admits to consuming cannabis regularly. That's about 1.4 million people. We're obviously geographically proximate to other states that are dragging their feet. I think we're a little more than halfway to saturation in terms of brick and mortar retail stores and the associated supply chain to support that. I don't think we'll have quite as many stores as there are liquor stores. But if you just look at that analogy, which I don't think is perfect, people like this product. And more people, I think of my parents' generation, will say, oh my, I'm not going to get judged, playing bridge if I come high. So there's going to be people who come out of the closet and realize, wait, this isn't, the devil's lettuce like the federal government has lied to us about for years. And I think, having someone smoke a joint at a 4th of July party will be equally, not notable as it is when someone drinks an infused seltzer, right? I just think that the substance itself has a following. The more people who try it might say, wow, that's delightful, and I don't have a horrible crushing hangover. Oh, and by the way, it biologically can't kill me. So why wouldn't I do that? I think humans, for all of human history, have put things in our bodies to make our brains feel differently. I remember as a kid spinning around until I was dizzy, and I often thought, do a lot of people who tried drugs, did they do that beforehand? I don't know. It's a nice, respite from the crushing weight of reality. That's why I consume cannabis every night before my kids, after my kids are asleep, before I go to bed. I think the appetite is there. I think it's going to stay there. And I think there's going to be a huge shuffle in who remains open. I think some people in the early days, if you build it, they will come. Those days are dwindling really fast. If you're not accessible, if you're not near where the people are, you're going to fail. And it has nothing to do with your product mix, your store experience. I just personally think a lot of people over-design these stores and think that people want some sort of, coaching or journey. Some do. I think most people shop, like their liquor store. I know what I want. Or maybe I'll ask a couple questions. It's not this, hour-long consultative experience.
It's based on price and convenience, right? Those are the two things that everyone in every category across the world is price and convenience. And one note about the 3-store limit, Washington State had that as well, and now we have 6. So when I mentioned that every state has high expenses and low supply, all of that works its way out, including the regulatory restrictions on things like stores. That will open up. You guys will be able to have 5 or 6 in about 2 years, just like everybody else. Prices of hash will go from $60 a gram down to something more normal. And just like everything else, an $80 1 gram of concentrate or vape cart will come back down to $30, $40 for a gram. Everything that happens in these emerging markets like Massachusetts is not abnormal. It's pretty, as an analyst myself, I can predict all of these things on a graph. And eventually within 2 years, you guys will come back down to normal. And I think to Jimmy's question earlier about what's it going to take to get some kind of normalcy in terms of the numbers and the competition, I think a lot of that has to do with brands that are pretending to make hash, like you were mentioning, Blake. Those guys are gone. Like, forget about it. And so capitulation and these individuals who have no idea what they're doing are all going to fail when the economy finally crashes. And it's crashing right now. We just saw 2 days ago, like the 5th worst market in history in terms of the S&P 500 futures. So there will be a time when these individuals who are too altruistic to pay themselves, they're struggling and they're not paying themselves a dime. They got to go. They've been doing this for 5 or 10 years, and eventually they're going to get out of the way. And so there probably won't be as many stores as needed. And then that's where that Budweiser, unfortunately, thing is going to come in, where these big conglomerates will appease the masses but that just leaves more discerning customers that actually know what good hash tastes like. We'll be able to know where to go, where to find it. But for all those other folks that just want big bud, that'll be available, I think, in the same kind of areas like grocery stores and liquor stores. It won't be their 400 or 500 growers that we see in Washington State or 7,500 licenses in Oklahoma. It's just not realistic.
Right. Hey,
So I have two parts. I'm sorry, Jim. Two parts. So the first part is I think we keep confusing stores with cultivation. Right. So, and I always use the analogy, Jim Beam doesn't own a liquor store. Right. So, but they produce and they ship out all over the place. So if there's not a ton of dispensaries, it doesn't mean, like our store, we carry over 40 different manufacturers. And when we're growing our own, it'll sit right next to those same 40 manufacturers. So, the store a half mile away, similar menus, just like a liquor store. And to Blake's point, I think Boston. So we're going into Boston as well. So we're going to be in Dorchester, and we know that the half mile buffer doesn't support enough stores, right? So we're having to all go in we did have to go in before the Zoning Board of Appeal and reduce those spaces. So that just goes to say that there's going to be one less than a half a mile away times 52 licenses within the city of Boston. To your point, that's still only 20% of the amount of liquor stores in Boston. But liquor stores, first of all, don't pay the same amount of, retail space, all that green tax stuff that we talked about, right? And as a cultivator, regardless of what the price does on this end, it's still going to cost you $10 million to $13 million to build that cultivation site. So that's where we saw in some other parts of the country where, the market got flooded, the price dropped, and you can't afford to make payments on that $13 million cultivation facility. So it's done. It's over.
Yeah.
So we have to be there has to be a sensible balance to where business can stay alive with its investment that it's spent, that it's already at the high side. If the prices were to plummet, a lot of, and we're not early adopters.
You're explaining MedMen's model right now.
Yeah, hang on. I got to take a time out, guys. This has been great. I've got a couple more guests, I believe, coming in next. But Blake, I told you could plug your webinar next week.
Oh, yeah.
I want you to be able to do that. Go ahead.
Thank you. So next Tuesday at 10 a.m., I'm co-sponsoring a webinar with Mass Lawyers Weekly on all of the changes from the recent cannabis reform that Governor Baker signed at the end of July. It's going to be chock full of information. It's myself, an attorney from Davis Malm, going over the nuts and bolts about what comes next. And then actually later that day, I'm talking at Boston Cannabis Week about that unique corporate structure I described for our South Station store. So yeah, if you can tune in, that'd be great. And yeah, thanks as always, Jimmy.
Where do we get more information on that? The Mensing group?
Yeah, so I have it on my LinkedIn. I got kicked off of Instagram recently, but I'll put it out on Twitter so you guys can sign up. I'm at the Mensing group on Twitter. I'll put that out. And yeah, thanks for the reminder.
No worries. All right. We got to take a break, Scott. Always a pleasure to see you, sir. I look forward to, you won't believe this, but I'm actually moving closer to you, and I can explain that off air, if you will. We're going to take a break and come back on the other side.
See you more often, actually.
All right. I appreciate that, man. I appreciate it. We'll come back in a little while. Don't go away.
Hey, you want to grow your own plants? Check out Style Lighting's Grow Kit. It has everything you need to become an expert home grower and bring the power of the sun indoors. Style Lighting uses TCP's high-powered commercial LEDs that deliver twice the output in the market. The Grow Kit has a grow bag, a timer, chains to hang the light, and of course the best in the business lighting system by TCP. Check out stylelighting.shop for more information.
the wine lady.
Oh.
Yes. Glad I sent that down to us. How is it?
That's pretty good. It's different. It's a little earthier, heartier taste.
I want to try out more. Some good shit. She's a good girl on the fourth, and she got no pressure and no peer pressure.
All right, welcome back to Green Rush Live on a Friday afternoon on Pro Cannabis Media. I'm the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, Jimmy Young. Happy to be joined this week and a lot of weeks by Josh Kincaid from Washington State. He does a regular show almost daily called The Talking Hedge, and you can check that out on YouTube as well. Josh, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Jimmy. Thanks.
And you probably just saw a clip that you were wondering, what the heck is going on in this clip? So that was Deborah Borchardt of the Green Market Report. She was moderating a panel at the Mensing Cannabis Conference. I believe that was in Chicago this week. Mike Tyson was alongside, and somehow or other, somebody came up with a joint. And they passed it back and forth. And Deborah was all giddy that she had just gotten high with Mike Tyson. And you know what? As Mike keeps getting out there, by the way, I believe he was hanging out with Robert Kraft at a football game recently. You got to figure that there are more and more people smoking and hanging out with Mike Tyson. He's definitely a guy who gets out there and enjoys it, right? Absolutely. All right. So let me introduce the two people that are with us here today. One is Nikki John. She is the first female person of color to open a dispensary in Boston. It's the Heritage Club. You're in Charlestown, Boston, right?
Yep, that's where we are, right off the Rotary.
And as many people from Boston like to say, Charlestown. I grew up in the suburbs. I know how to pronounce my R's, and I try to anyway as a former broadcaster. So Nikki John, thank you, and congratulations on opening. How big a relief is that?
A huge one, yeah. Now I didn't realize this was the starting line, but that was a good break, just getting it done.
There you go. And also joining us is Colton Griffin. He is the CEO of Flourish Software. Hello, Colton.
How's it going?
Tell us a little bit about Flourish Software.
We're one of the leading software platforms serving the cannabis and hemp industries. We help our customers handle all of their core inventory management and supply chain functions, from cultivation through manufacturing, extraction, wholesale distribution. And then on the retail side, we do vertically integrated retail and multi-store retail. So a lot of tech pulling it all together.
Sounds like you're bigger than just one dispensary like Nikki just opened in Boston, right?
We just launched our Jane integration at 47 dispensaries last week. So which was an impressive launch that went very smooth. Kudos to the team sides and the client. So we handle all sorts of sizes and shapes across the country.
And you're in Los Angeles, California, I think. Am I right?
Yep. Sunny LA, Venice.
There you go. So we've got LA, we've got Washington State, and we've got Charlestown here in Boston. Okay, so that's the Nikki. I want to ask you, how difficult was it for you to go through this process, and how did you get access to the capital that you need? And did you feel like it was readily available? I know that's a heavy question.
Honestly, so quick and easy answer, yes. I felt like it was easy, but I feel like it shouldn't have been the easiest part. The entire process, the politics, was the hardest part, and that's what made the financing easy. If there were less political barriers to entry, finance would be the number one. And I did a friends and family round, a lot of networking. When I first started and did my first pitches, I got tons of offers, but they wanted 49%, and that was not going to work for me. So I stuck with it, and I didn't take in any funds until after my provisional license, about last December. So, yeah.
Well, I'm amazed. I've talked to a few people from your operation there, and they're all outstanding. Oh boy, we are expanding our Zoom room as we speak here, and I just want to make sure that everybody is here. I see Geoff Trotter is with us. Geoff, you are the it says CGO, Chief Growth Officer of Regennabis. Is that accurate?
That's correct. Yeah, accurate.
And tell me where you are and what you do, pal.
San Francisco, California. And Regennabis is at the forefront of helping put ESG performance right in the middle of the cannabis industry. So I'll tell you more about that over the coming minutes.
All right, fair enough. And I'm pretty sure that's Brooke Westlake with us as well. She's with our Women in Cannabis Expo and all that. How are you, Brooke? You're muted, so don't say hello until you're unmuted. Hi.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome back to the show. So, this is good because we have a woman who champions women in cannabis in Brooke. Brooke, tell us about the Women in Cannabis Expo, what you do first. Go ahead.
So the Women in Cannabis Expo, we have been hosting 4 shows this year, and our next one is in Las Vegas, Nevada, in a week and a half. And we are all about, our goals include supporting women, uplifting women, helping them if they want to get into the business, if they're currently in the business, helping the education component. We do awards and scholarships, and yes, we are woman-led and run, but we do have males that support us and males that come to our events, and we encourage that. And my other brand that I actually launched this year is called Legally Blonde and Blunt. So it's all those girly things that you cannot find in your local dispensary, including apparel, jewelry, and clothing, and pipes with glitter.
I love the entrepreneurial spirit of this industry. Josh, I know you've been, you've had a state around you, and here's a great example, Nikki John here, who would be a great speaker, I think, just to share her experience with what she went through and how she got it done. It's funny. We're sitting here, we're championing entrepreneurial spirit. We all recognize that the future is in the hands of some people in Washington, D.C. right now that just don't have a clue on what the rest of the country wants to do. Colton, you're smiling. I'm going to go to you for this one first. Go ahead.
Well, who knows what's happening? There's a lot hanging in the balance and a lot of unknowns. The one thing I think that we all have to plan around is that unknown. And those things you cannot control. The regulator likes to do in your license for 6 months, or the rules that were all in the program that was supposed to launch fall 2020 being 9 months delayed, or in Washington, who knows what's going on. I'm not holding my breath, but it could also happen tomorrow.
Oh man, yeah, that would be a wonderful thing to wake up to, but I just the reality has set in. We're from Massachusetts. We tend to be a little skeptical here, even though we were the ones who started this whole country. We had a big party. You might have heard of it, right? And actually, Nikki is right near, I'm pretty sure, where the Boston Tea Party took place. Am I right?
Yep, not too far.
Fantastic. That's and my whole goal was to create media that would connect both coasts, because the East Coast, Massachusetts being the first state to adult use legalize cannabis, it still took them 2 years to get the first dispensary open. Now we're 4 years in, and there's over 240 in this state. And there's all sorts of issues with that too. And we covered a few of them in the first half hour of this show with Blake Mensing and with Scott Winters from CNA stores. But there are so many other issues out there that the local little operator, like Nikki's company out in Charlestown, have to overcome. And it isn't easy doing business in this space, is it, Nikki?
No, yeah, there's a lot of hoops, there's a lot of regulations, a lot of compliance. And as we start to get product in, we're seeing that even the largest operators still have compliance things they have to take care of. So it's not easy for anybody.
And Geoff, I want to come back to you and let you talk a little bit about Regennabis as the Chief Growth Officer. Now, in the cannabis space, when you hear grow, you think the plant in the ground. This is not the growth that you're involved with. Am I right?
It's that and more. We look at growth in its entirety. Could be organizational growth, could be geographic expansion. It could, frankly, just be something we do focus on is around brand and purpose centricity. So tying that back to performance around sustainability and then back to environmental, social governance factors. So there's an awful lot of different areas of growth. I think it's also fair to say that when we look at growth, We don't only look at economic growth, we look at social impact, we look at environmental impact. We have a very specific approach. Sometimes we refer to ourselves, even though we're a sort of a private equity firm as well, we have an investment arm. We like to call ourselves a venture multi-capital firm, in the sense that the capital that we are looking to put into organizations is not only, of course, economic capital, but intellectual capital, manufacturing capital, things like, we also have a software as a service platform called ESGXL that we embed into client organizations so they can grow their businesses, in all dimensions, but recognizing what their environmental, social governance performance should be and how that translates into sustainability. And it really then enables those organizations. We offer it also to organizations that we don't invest in. It could be publicly listed entities. The idea here is that investors will increasingly look at those organizations as delivering not only an economic upside, but they're delivering a social impact as well as an environmental impact, which is just as important. You only have to ask the chap who's just given up his business from Patagonia to understand where this could all go.
Right. And actually, you mentioned environmental. There's a couple of notes that I see in the news wires as I read them every week. There was a bunch of politicians, let's not go with one side or the other. Politicians are going to throw them all under the bus, basically, because they just look to cause trouble instead of representing the people that put them there. And it drives me nuts in so many ways. And it's frustrating for those businesses that are, the margins in the cannabis space, I don't care what part you're in, they're still pretty small, right? There's nothing easy about being in the cannabis business. They don't make it easy to start. They don't make it easy to sustain. They don't make it easy to survive. And yet the passion that I continue to see drives the entrepreneur. It really does. And adapting and improvising. Colton, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about the importance of adapting and improvising in an always changing environment and social structure that we have here with cannabis.
I spent the first half of my career in more traditional supply chain world, and it's not surprising that a lot of people that come from that world and jump in with a really good pedigree have a hard time surviving, because this space is like much more dynamic than I think would be reasonable for people to deal with, but because we put up with a lot to make it all work. And some of us just happy to be here. We say, sure, we can handle that. We can retool our entire business and overnight. That's no problem. We've already done it 4 or 5 times, and and we just kind of have to do it. But you have to be agile. You have to be able to plug and play. You have to be able to, from packaging to labeling to new quantity limits to, suddenly the store layout doesn't meet this inspector's expectation, and knock out a wall, put in a new wall. Everyone on this call's been through it. It's it's just mind-boggling. We work in about 17 states across the country, so we see it all for the last 5 years, just the things that people get thrown at them. It's incredible. But we keep fighting.
That's right.
Happen.
Nikki, what's the biggest thing that was thrown at you?
Rejection, obviously. But I think coming from sales, coming from just my parents telling me you can do anything, I was like, okay, I'll survive it. But you definitely feel it. Nobody likes being told no, but if you can just remember, figure out your why, or know how you can overcome whatever it is, you just stick with it.
Brooke, women in cannabis. We've talked about this subject many times on this show, and there has been in the beginning of cannabis, there was a lot more influence by females at the C level. We have seen that disappear. Are we ever going to see it come back? I know you'd like to see that.
I would love to see that, and I think that we will once organizations want to pay females what they desire. And if females, they left these businesses because they were not getting paid as equal as our male counterparts, and they were wearing 20 different hats. And, at the end of the day, they said, why am I doing all this work? If I'm not the owner, why am I doing that? And so I believe that we will. The other way that we can accomplish this goal is that these women having their own businesses. But with that being said, as everybody has mentioned here, the many, many challenges, I got into the space to have a cannabis testing lab that I still don't have because of state regulations in my own state of Nevada. And Jimmy, you also touched on something else about having too many dispensaries in Massachusetts, or what are some of the complicated issues that we see. We're hearing a lot now of inclusion and social equity, and that sounds real sexy and great, and the politicians are selling that. But what they're not doing is they're setting all these businesses up for failure. And so women have to be cognitive of this as well. I've been watching this, and I work with women every day, all day. And there's a woman that I work with out of Long Beach. And so originally the Social Equity Fund was supposed to be $500,000 for each person that got a license. And then they knocked it down to $100,000. Now she's opening a cannabis testing lab down there. She needs $2.5 million. And she speaks her voice at these meetings. But I think the bottom line is that we have to hold the politicians accountable. We have to hold our communities accountable. And we have to stand up and say, like the women have done, and this is why we saw them leave the C-suite, we have to say, I am valued at this amount. This is my price. You either hire me or you don't. Or we have to say, I will go then create my own company and have all the headaches with it and make the money that I want to make versus working for somebody else.
Josh, I want to bring you in here, and I'm going to mention a comment in the chat room from Penny Hearts. A great point. Mike Tyson got to market in Illinois before any of the supposed social equity were supposed to help there. Illinois has been a big mess. Josh, I know you have some insight on that too.
I saw that he didn't get into Ottawa, but I thought that no celebrity could get into Canada. So it's kind of like they're trying to use his fame to get in where they can, and it's obviously working. Bureaucrats don't care, especially in Illinois. I don't think anybody's looking at Illinois as a
example of a democracy.
Thank you. Yeah, I wasn't going to go there, but yeah.
I'm sorry.
So it's no surprise that he would have the influence and the cash and the resources to get in before anybody else. It's unfortunate, but I would like to throw something else at Nikki, because I have talked to a couple in Illinois, as a matter of fact, and some from the East Coast that are social equity applicants that are still having a hard time. And I had no idea when I was being approached to be on the board. Folks were like, we need a white guy. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, yeah, we can only get so far. And I was like, I don't understand. Can you help me? Nikki, can you help us understand? Do you feel that? Have you seen it? Have you heard it? Is it real?
It's 100% real. And I think that they're making the right choice by looking for that, because you need someone whose voice can be heard. And it's like, when you speak up and like people tell you sound angry. I had a contractor tell me I was angry for asking him to do a job I had already paid for. That would never happen if I was a white man. So you have to have the right people in place to manage the job sites, that you don't have to have those conversations, and so that it's more effective. And in Boston, I'm the first Boston equity applicant to open. Multiple equity applicants were approved months before I was approved, but they didn't have any help. And so these equity programs aren't working. I make an effort to CC all of the emails about any difficulties I'm having with the city's equity program, so that even if they don't help me now, that they can start to take a look at the problems that are going on. Being proactive. A lot of people getting into these spaces don't have business experience. I went to school for finance. I've been in real estate for 10 years. So I'm not starting at the same place some of these people who are in the equity program are. And so they need someone who can bring that corporate or business expertise or have those conversations more fluidly.
Right. And now I've got two guys from California here that I want to get some feedback from on this. People in this space now, you either know cannabis or you know business. Very rare are we finding the cannabis business person. It's evolving, so it takes time. Is that accurate in California too, Colton and Geoff? Geoff has already got a face on, so I'll go with Geoff first.
I mean, I don't know that I don't know that I could speak for all of California. I mean, what I see is a slow but steady growing up, if you like, of, to use the crow word again, you started something. I think we're seeing the industry grow up because there's an ever increasing pressure placed on business owners to behave more appropriately rather than just looking. I mean, you know, if you think of your own show called The Green Rush, we have to move beyond seeing the opportunity that this is a green rush. There's an awful lot more at stake here. And when we at Regennabis, we don't only focus on a state, we don't even focus only on the states. We look at this holistically, and we look at all countries around the world. We're aligned to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We see this as a movement around, let's say, you know, of the plant, by the plant, for the plant. And we think we have an incredible opportunity with cannabis in whether it's recreational, medical, or in the industrial space to really change the way humanity interacts with the planet. And so, you know, I see a little bit of growing up happening, whether that's only in California. No, I see it happening elsewhere. I certainly see it happening in Europe, and increasingly we see it in Latin America, and we're heartened by that. But I don't know if I'm sort of best positioned to sort of speak whether or not specific parts of the industry in California are growing up. I know they're feeling a tremendous amount of pain. California isn't exactly a straw person or you know, for the industry.
It's a completely different planet, first of all. Every time
for sure,
the same thing. This is not like any other state in America. And by the way, that could be a draw. That can be a good thing. I'm not saying that's a negative thing. Colton, I got to get your feedback on this. Go ahead.
It's also 39 million of us here. So, so blanket statements don't apply, but very aligned with what you guys are working on, Geoff. I think that's probably why I'm in this industry is the transformational changes happening, you know, around it. And I will say that, you know, some of the smartest, hardest working business-minded folks I met come from, you know, legacy cannabis operations where they figured out how to do a lot that a lot of us appreciated for decades, with a lot at risk. So I don't know. It's I don't know that it's like. I don't know that's either or. I mean, you know, you see how much people can do with the resources and lack of resources that they've traditionally had. It sometimes does become like a burden or a stumbling point because, you know, if you're so used to just doing it all yourself, you're like, oh, we actually do have vendors now that actually can take this off your load and you can focus on running the business. And, you know, and there is a whole another level of things you have to run through nowadays to be mindful, like, you know, the tax issue. It's the hugest thing. I mean, talked about margins. I mean, the margins can be great, but doesn't matter if you have great margins if all of your money is going to the federal government, you know, like, and you can't deduct any of the things that you'd expect to deduct from running the business. Like it's not just about margins, it's like a whole life cycle of tax planning that informs every little piece of your business. And you have to have these systems and processes in place, or you can wake up thinking you made a bunch of money and not have anything left.
I know how that feels.
One of brands just had to leave California. I don't know if you guys saw that, but they have a $300 million plan from Canopy, I think, to purchase them. So if they can't make it in California, is that making you guys a little bit stressed out?
I know I got folks in California, clients that are still investing and growing and expanding their business and making great money, right? But they know the market, they run really tight operations, they have great people, including some great women. Actually, some of the best operators we work with have women in key positions across the organization. And you know, one of our head implementation folks was a client before joining us, and she's like phenomenal on the manufacturing side, on the level of detail and organization, and whipping everybody into shape because it's there. But you know, it's all doom and gloom in the headlines. Like I live here in Venice, right? You know, and you saw on Fox News all last summer. Oh my God, my dad's calling me. What's going on next door? All these homeless people. I'm like, dude, it's just like one little piece of the street, right? Everyone loves to hate on California, but at the end of the day, there's so much wealth and opportunity and like good business happening that it's just shaking it out, and if you can't make it, it's probably just because you don't know the market, you're not running a good business. No, don't tell that to the farmers up north who are being screwed because they can't get to market. But for mid-market, like manufacturing distro, it's just about, watching your pennies.
I'm gonna go right around the group here, and I want to ask each one of you. Are you confident that the federal government is going to do anything right in as far as cannabis goes? Because if you look at everybody smiling, if you look at every state's own little entity, right? Because after all, you have 19 states, everybody has different rules, and then you get 38 or 39 decriminalized states. There's so many different issues that this plant and this industry are involved with. The size of a regulatory group overseeing this, like, do we have one in place? Do you guys believe that the DEA or the agricultural group or the liquor group could actually just roll right over and do cannabis? There's so many different things. Are we confident at all? And what would be the simplest little step? And I'm, you know where I'm going with this. It has to be the banking thing. Is there that little step? We can't even, the industry can't even get that across into the Senate debate world, let alone getting it voted on. Are we confident? Josh, I'm going to start with you just because you're alongside. Are you confident at all that anything's going to happen at the federal level before the end of the year? Let's just make it that far.
0% chance, Jimmy.
Zero. Everybody's shaking. No way, right? No way. Well, Geoff, wait.
Yeah,
Your accent does me. Hang on a second. Your accent tells me something before you speak. Okay. No disrespect. I'm profiling you here. I admit it. Okay. But go ahead.
Well, as you've picked up on the accent,
Yes.
look, this is not the United States of America. This is the disunited state of America. The fact that we have so many states pushing for legalization at a state level, and yet the federal government continues to sit on its hands, it beggars belief, frankly. There are a number of acts going through, whether it's the CAO Act, the MORE Act, the SRA, all these various laws that are looking to be passed, where they're discussing whether or not we should legalize and or decriminalize cannabis. It's frankly amazing that there are so many, and that doesn't help, because of course it means that any persons who are looking at passing these laws can say, oh yeah, but this doesn't have this and this one has this. And I'm not even sure that level of discourse goes on, by the way, but that's by the by. You're right that either the Safe Banking Act or the CLIMB Act, the Capital Lending and Investment in Marijuana Businesses Act, which is co-sponsored by a Democrat and a Republican, Troy Carter out of Louisiana and Guy Hexenthaler out of Pennsylvania. Actually, that, in the context of this broader discussion around social equity, is the one that we would really hope and pin our monies on passing, because frankly, not only would it enable a greater liquidity in the cannabis space because of investors, it would also, secondly, afford those state legal businesses to list in the United States, which also brings increased liquidity. But the best thing that could happen is that what it really means when the CLIMB Act passes is that whatever laws you have at a state level that enables small businesses to grow, then those same rights, those same programs would have to be available. So the SBA would be called in to create then a more of a level playing field for social equity players. Because Nikki will tell you, and I'm very familiar with the story, which is a fantastic story. But even once you get your license, there's no guarantee, because frankly, you still don't have real access to capital over a long period of time in order to really get your business going, because a business doesn't happen overnight. It requires a good couple of years of a runway, and that couple of years requires capital. And that's the challenge that we have. And so you come back to 19 states that have legalized recreational cannabis, and you see that not all of them have social equity programs. In fact, there is not any two states that have similar programs in place. It's a whole goddamn mess.
Right.
And so if I'm to be a betting man and I'm going to push and I'm going to call folks in Congress, I would say let's push for the Climb Act, because I think it stands to benefit more, because I don't think that the feds will legally free up cannabis in the near term. I really don't. But the other acts, Climb and the Safe Banking Act, don't require legalization and or decriminalization. And so let those two parties just have at it.
Yeah. Brooke, how do you, what's your reaction to that, Brooke? Go ahead.
I agree with a lot of that. I think the other issue is, as collaboratively as we all are here today, I think that all of us who are in leadership roles need to look at these people who are in office and challenge them. Get them out of office. They're not doing their job. They keep passing all these things. You know, the career politicians, up and out. You should be in one term, get out, you know, come in with passion. So we're missing the right people in office. I think we're 5 to 10 years away. And like Geoff said, you've got to have that money, and a lot of these businesses don't. And at the end of the day, the risk falls on the individual. The risk falls on the woman owner, the male owner. There's no bailout for us. We don't get a mortgage bailout or a bank bailout. So start calling out your senators, start calling them out in your state. These programs that they say they're putting together for social equity, call them out, let them know. Hey, you said you're giving 100,000. Did you know that a cannabis testing lab requires 2.5 million? Did you know that this agriculture facility needs $3 million? Like, what are you going to do if those people can't make it, because they're setting a lot of them up for failure? And especially with, you know, you can't write off all these different things on your taxes. What they're doing is creating a black market. And there's been some big name fallouts this year that have happened in the cannabis industry, such as Jay-Z's delivery system in California. He's a multi-million-dollar celebrity that can't make it. Tyson made it in a different realm. But if you start seeing people like that who are pulling back, who are saying, I'm not going to put my money here, it's not a viable, we don't even know what the profit margins are. We can't even say it's 2 or 3% or 5%. These are all things that need to be open-ended and discussed. And, you know, I made an executive decision this year. I ran for office. I ran for school board. And there was a PAC group behind talking, oh, she has a cannabis business. And I'm like, and it's legal in my state. Do you have a problem with it? Come at me and see what happens. So we've got to fight back. And I think that federally, we are a decade away. I don't think we're anywhere close to getting any of this hammered out for another decade.
Well, it'll certainly lend itself for talk shows like this for 10 years.
Can I just add one other thing? And again, just come back to the US and then beyond. Of course, we all know that the way the US works is, let's call it US Inc. It's all driven by money. Right, Sally Bowles was right. Money makes the world go around. Right, she can sing it as often as she wants in cabaret, and that's why I think the Climb Act and Safe Banking Act will see the shift. But the other thing that will happen that will probably get people's heads banged together is when a country like Germany comes online legally, and then other countries the size of Germany start following. The MSOs and the players, and as well as investors in the United States, won't sit idly by and let that happen. They'll want a slice of that action. And you could argue that actually that's another thing that would perhaps push parties to come together, because they could miss out on some significant upside as legalization of cannabis and the normalization of cannabis gathers pace around the world and more nations begin to move in that direction. So that I think is another caveat worth just bearing in mind.
We need every factor possible. Colton, what's your feeling?
The short answer is I don't have a lot of faith that the decision is going to be made in any sort of reasonable amount of timeline. But, you know, there's some existential questions like that are, I think, you know, our legislature has to face, right? Do they believe that this plant is a plant that should just be accessible to everybody, regulate like tobacco or like alcohol, you know, with some level of age protection, but nowhere close to the tagging and traceability and blah, blah, that we have today. And if they believe that, you know, and they want to legalize it federally, which means legalizing interstate commerce and legalizing possession and legalizing home grow and legalizing the plant truly, that is not exactly aligned with like the biggest it's maybe aligned with the biggest aggregate economic impact, the small businesses in this country, but it's definitely not aligned with the biggest companies in this space whose competitive advantage are generally limited license modes, right? And so like in California, I think when legalization and rec was originally passed, there was limits on canopy size. And it was like the first thing that got undercut, right? Which is driving every small business, all the small businesses, all the small farms, all the legacy farmers, the small percentage that actually said, you know what, I'm going to take the leap and I'm going to go legal and I'm going to do the right thing. And they're all going out of business because we're not giving them access to the market. And guess what? Everyone in this country wants that product. They want that product, but they can't get it. And so if we're really serious about legalization, then we should be serious about like full unequivocal legalization, and we should know as if you're a public stockholder, shareholder, like that'll, I would say, I don't, it's hard to put a hard number on it, but 80% of those companies could just go out of business because they're just nowhere equipped to survive on a national distribution, even if it was like a 90-day lead time on it. And so I think that's why we'll see inaction, right? Because enough money is being made in the right spots that we can settle for a better way to put it in the bank. But are we really, really going to get what we really want, which is like full, real, actual legalization and treat cannabis like a plant that doesn't kill people, unlike alcohol?
Right. I got to tell you,
and cigarettes.
I talk about that. I teach at the college level locally here in Boston area, and I talk about the dangers of alcohol every single year on a campus in America. A kid gets alcohol poisoning and dies. Okay. And by the way, underage, which is another beef of mine. I grew up when it was 18. I think I learned long before my parents knew what the hell was going on, right? How to use these products responsibly. That's the key. And that comes from education. Nikki, yep. Despite all this, you just opened your doors. Are you confident you're going to make it?
Well, the week before we opened, I wanted to quit. I like to say that to just share that like it changes day to day. But I do think we'll make it somehow. And I don't think legalization is like great for me. Pretty similar to what Colton said, it's really bad for the small businesses. Once you see big tobacco, big alcohol, big pharma, that is a really bad sign. Like any sign of that, and I need to prepare to exit. But I don't know how quickly that will happen, how organized the federal government will be in terms of bringing on the right people to legalize this. You've seen even on a city, town, state level, they can't pick the right people. So I don't see that happening bigger, and I'm not too afraid of it, but I'm naive, and that's how I got here. So
I want to say that legalization is going to be good for small business. Actually, it's the best thing that could save every small business in this space is federal legalization, because big business can't move at the same pace that we can move in cannabis. Traditional business can't. And big business in cannabis cannot move at the same pace as small business. And people want to visit their local shop. Like you look at, I live in Venice, 90% approval of weed, right? I have to walk a mile to get to the dispensary, and I have to walk by 4 places I can buy liquor. All 4 of those places I can buy liquor are owned by there's all small businesses owned by local people. Those are, and that is access, and that is equity. And all 4 of those businesses are owned by, I don't know everyone, but I know the people that run a couple of those, and they're minority owned, small businesses. And that is the ticket to making this work. America's built on small business, and people want to buy, from their local shop and make their cool edibles and make their cool carts and make the craft beer is a renaissance that's happened in the last 10 years here. And I actually think that if we don't do something on the federal legalization, the only people that will be able to survive in cannabis are the people that can raise money on the public markets through press releases and burn cash to wait it out, because that's what's happening right now in every mature market.
I'll tell you why you guys are both right. Nikki's right because she has to build her business up to be acquired, and Colton's right because they are slow and bloated. So I was just in New York for a financial innovation conference, and I do interviews with Seeking Alpha, a financial news site, and I talk to publicly traded CEOs all the time, and I ask them that very question, like, aren't you worried about like big corporations coming in? And the response is always the same, no. And I'll tell you what, a letter that I wrote earlier about that same thing about credit unions in my experience out in New York, when I said that credit unions that I spoke to seem slow to respond or react to the advances within the financial tech space, making it an interesting conundrum during the pivotal time when definancial regulations could sweep across the U.S. financial system, wipe out a lot of irrelevant financial institutions. So you would think credit unions would be more inclined to adopt technology, but they're just as slow and bloated as big commercial banks. That was my feedback response to them, and that's why cannabis won't be missed out. If you have a brand worth buying, you will be bought out. If your ego's too far in the way and you don't see an exit strategy, then you will be a Larry's Handy Mart in a world of 7-Elevens.
Oh, can I add to that, Josh? Because I just love everything you just said. I had written down some notes, and one of the things is you have to learn to exit the business before the business exits you. And the other thing in this industry, and why I started the Expo, was because I don't have my cannabis testing lab, and I had launched 2 brands at the same time. But you got to be able to diversify within this industry as well. And you got to look for the niche markets that are missing. And that's why we then created Legally Blonde and Blunt. They're not catering to the businesswoman. They're not giving me the blingy things that I want when I want to consume my cannabis. So Colton, you're also right. There are brands out there that will survive because people still want those things. And the other thing is 2 things. Jimmy, you mentioned alcohol, and that is so, we don't educate the children on alcohol, and we need education for all of it. But what's interesting is consumption lounge licenses are opening up here in Nevada, and what they are requiring for them is that you have to have a ride system, Uber kind of connection. You don't have that at bars. You don't have that at casinos where the bars are, and people, you're not like checking them before they walk out the door. So it's so backwards. And lastly, the one thing that I think is also hindering us is that we still have not gone through prison reform, and we still have people in states where it's legal where they're still locked up. And if we can't get those people out and get them out and get them into viable businesses or working, I mean, it's like this double-edged sword. So I agree with what everybody's saying, but that's the notes that I wanted to leave on.
No, I think that's great. And I got to tell you, guys, this was supposed to be a half-hour panel. I just want to say, and I let it go because it was so great. And I love talk shows where I don't have to be the one that's talking. Okay, that's the best part. And by the way, both of my ex-wives think the same thing. All right, so there you go. I had to do it. This has been great. I mean, we have about, usually we take a break at the half-hour mark, but I just let it go, and I've been texting my staff, and I just let it go. But I really enjoyed talking. Every one of you has a different perspective and a different thing to add to the conversation, which I thought was great. And Nikki, I'm telling you, I'm coming to visit you. I swear. Okay. I can't wait. You don't even know this, but we're going to start a show, I'm hoping, called The Bud Crawl, which will be very similar to a very successful brand in the Boston area called the Phantom Gourmet. Are you familiar with the Phantom Gourmet? It's a restaurant review run by the legendary Andelman family. The father was the king of sports talk when I was growing up, which was in the 60s and 70s. Yes, I turned 65 2 weeks ago. Okay. And I'm always the oldest guy at these trade shows. I just want to say, for the most part. But now it's a new world. Geoff, you were talking a little bit about the plant's role in the world, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm going to send you, I think I have your, I'd love to get all, Brooke, I know I have your email. Josh, I talk to you all the time. Nikki, I want to make sure I get yours, Colton and Geoff too. I want to send you the logo that I created 3 years ago, because I buy into exactly what you're saying. There are so many ways for this plant to impact the world. So I took a giant cannabis leaf and wrapped it around the earth. And that is my logo for my saying that I end every show with, which is it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly, because I believe in that. I really do. Yep. It was, and I'm going to throw it out here again. Steve D'Angelo's book, The Cannabis Manifesto. When I read that, I'm reading it and I'm like, I could have written this. This is exactly the role the plant has played in my life. I've got chronic arthritis, guys. I was an athlete once, and I've got metal parts, and I'm going to lose my right hip next. I have a spine that's deteriorating. It's pathetic. And Matt, now you know why I have 2 ex-wives. I just sit around, I complain all the time, right? Because I'm in pain. I'm in pain. Either I'm in pain or I'm on high, whatever. So the point I'm trying to make here is we in the industry continue to have to share our passion with those who perhaps don't understand why we're so passionate about this. Aaron Smith, the executive director of the NCIA, I was at an event with him in Albany about, I don't even know, 3 months ago, whatever it was. And he made a great point. Whenever we can, talk to people about this. Brooke, you said you ran for school committee, and people were like, well, you're in the cannabis business. Fuck you. That's what I would say to these people. You know what?
I'll tell you. So
Qualified to comment.
Right. Because Nevada, we're a rec state and medical state, so they weren't publicly doing it, but they were doing it behind the scenes, and they were pissed off. They were mad. I jumped in right before. I didn't tell anybody I was going to run, and I was giving these people a run for their money, and they were like, where did she come from? And so I just called them out on everything, and I called bullshit. And it's like, go ahead, come at me. Go ahead, run an ad about me having a cannabis business, and I'm going to earn 20,000 more votes. So go ahead and do that. Unfortunately, I missed winning the primary by 104 votes. So I was so close, but that tells me that I was so close that I do plan on running again. And I will gladly share all my brands in the cannabis industry. And I will gladly talk about how children have to be educated. I'm a single mom of 2 boys, 12 and 3 years old. I would much prefer that my 12-year-old, when he's old enough, if he wants to consume cannabis, I have a missing section of my colon. I almost died. It's keeping me alive at this point. I would much rather my son use cannabis than alcohol. And we've had these discussions all the time because he used to say, Mom, there's a weed business. And I said, you sound uneducated, say cannabis. I'm not going to have you saying that around your friends. It's inappropriate. But yes, I gave them a run for their money, and I plan on fully doing it again.
That's great. And it is education. And I go back to something I talk about a lot. There's a reason why Europe has less alcoholics than the United States of America.
Mm-hmm.
They introduce it at an early age, and they educate their children about the dangers and how to use it responsibly. The same thing needs to happen in this country. The same, and I'm talking not for alcohol, by the way, I'm talking about cannabis here. All right. And I actually believe that we should lower the age to 18. I really do. That way, at least the kids in college, right, will at least have had some education before they get there, because otherwise they're just, they're just doing crazy things, and anyway, you don't want to get me on my high horse about the 18-year-old draft. I want, Israel, you've heard of Israel, right? The Jewish state. I just want to say 2 years, you turn 18, you give the country 2 years of your time. No choice. We've given a generation too many choices. Too many choices. And timeouts don't work, guys. Okay. They took corporal punishment away from parents. Okay. And now we've completely enabled and entitled an entire generation.
But shouldn't you? I mean, everybody knows if you take a rubber band and you pull it back, it's going to fling forward. Every parent should know if you restrict your kid, it's going to be that much worse. So you should be letting your kids get into trouble and doing things on their own and learning from that experience. Holding them back just makes it worse. And every parent should know that.
That's right. Absolutely true. Look, guys, I've never gone this far without taking a break. And we're right up against the top of the hour. I'd like to get some quick final thoughts from everybody here. And then a reminder that our news show follows this. I'm very proud of We Talk News. Josh is a correspondent. He's just one of about 10 correspondents that call in a report every week from their state, because my vision is to create an army of Josh Kincaids that'll be documenting the end of prohibition in our country, no matter how long it takes. Okay, that's been my vision. I'm an educator by trade, I guess, more than anything else, but that has to happen. Josh, go ahead. You get to do the final thought. Go ahead. Start it off.
Final thoughts. I think sustainability is going to be a big thing. Recycled tubes, for example, are going to be huge. I think angel investors are going to be a help, as kind of traditional finance is off to the side. Not even traditional finance, just regular venture capitalists are off on the sidelines. I think more angel investors will get involved. I think ESG is going to be a fad. I'm sorry, Geoff, but from the standpoint of mainstream investors, all they want is a return. When the return stops and the longest bull market in history ends, people will be looking for returns. And that means that the sin stocks will go up and ESG will fall to the side. That's my prediction. And I'm just going to leave the question of, why do we get social equity right at the university, but not with the SBA programs in investing? Or in the banking system? Banks do not give loans to people of color for any reason, and haven't. I never once in my career ever saw an SBA loan get approved. Why? I mean, it's not a rhetorical question. Let me know in the comments.
Right, absolutely. Brooke, go ahead.
My final thoughts are, I know that we've touched on a lot of critical topics. I believe that we're going to see a lot more businesses that close down we're not recession proof. Our industry is not recession proof. And I think that we're headed into a big recession. And I would say if your passion and heart is where it is in the plant, keep pushing forward. If one thing isn't working, you got to learn how to pivot. Pivot is so critical in this business. I am so grateful for all of you. We have our next Expo September 27th in Las Vegas, the day before MJ Unpacked. So please come and join us. We have 20 amazing women speakers. We have exhibitors. And we end our event with scholarships, awards, and a network mixer where everyone gets a little cocktail. They go outside, have a little smoke. And it's just an amazing thing. I'm grateful for each of you for being here and sharing everything that you guys are doing and what the challenges have been. And thank you, everybody, for your time.
Great. Geoff, go ahead.
Well, of course, I couldn't just sit idly by and say, I agree, Josh. Of course, I do not. We already know that there's a heightened regulatory activity that's creating more intense mandatory reporting requirements for businesses everywhere around ESG performance. And it's as critical now to an organization's success as profitability and financial performance. And that might not appear to be that way in the United States, but the Europeans have taken the lead on this. And if you're a cannabis company that has any aspiration of operating outside of these borders, then you will have to get familiar with your ESG performance, because the Europeans will demand something called double materiality. I'll just leave it at that. It's coming. It's not a fad. Pretty much guarantee that. I do think, though, the other point is, we held an event in May at the United Nations called Regenerative Cannabis Live. We had 32 speakers. 21 of those speakers were women. Jamie Pearson, Kim Rivers, Toy Hutchinson, Bridget Hennessy, some of the great and the good from the cannabis industry were there speaking. We fundamentally believe, we have 11 of our 19 advisory board members are women. We fundamentally believe that there needs to be a far more equitable approach, whether it's around gender or race, both in not only this industry, but frankly, any industry in the United States, because for 403 years, you could argue that there has been no social equity in any industry. And that's something that we just need to take a good, long, hard look at. And that's the opportunity that cannabis presents to us. It's not just, we don't see cannabis as the end game. Frankly, cannabis is the vehicle to uplift 7.8 billion lives if we get it right. And we just got to get out of our own way and make this happen.
That's great. Geoff and Josh, I think you guys should get on. Geoff, Josh, you should have him on your show. That'd be great. And Colton, I don't want to forget you. I want to give you an opportunity to have last thoughts. Go ahead.
Hey, well, I say if you're in this industry, keep at it. If you want to be in this industry, there's still room for you. It's an amazing, amazing opportunity to just accelerate your career and define what this whole thing looks like. And, you gotta be investing in your business. Like, don't take your eye off the ball, because every decision matters right now. There's going to be a lot of shakeout across a lot of markets. It's an incredible opportunity. I think I'm going to be positive despite like the adversity in front of us. There's still a lot of good things happening. So, and obviously we're here to help. You can find us online, flourishsoftware.com. And happy to be a sounding board on anything and everything. So thank you.
I love it. Thank you so much. It's great to meet you guys. And Nikki, you get the last word, because you are in the trenches and you are a great example of the American spirit that is in cannabis. Go ahead.
Amen.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for having us. I think it was awesome to hear from all of you. You all have like some great perspectives, and I don't get a lot of breaks to hear from other people in the industry. So this is really hopeful. Like Colton said, anybody else out there, don't give up. Stay super focused. This is going to keep changing, but that's okay. And to Geoff, what you said, I think it's really important that we set an example for tech, even though that was a new space, no diversity, no equity was there. So if we can prove that we can do it in some capacity, Brooke, I know you're working on it, but if we can prove that we can do it, it will happen in some capacity. So I love what you guys are up to, and thank you so much for giving us a platform to share.
Yeah, it was a great, absolutely. That's what I want to do. And every Friday afternoon, we're here with a live talk show, and we love interesting people to talk about this because there are so many fascinating elements of this industry that we're in. So for everybody on my staff, both of them, Isabel and Dan, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
This edition of Green Rush Live is supported by Canna Business Resources, helping you grow with Canna Business funding. Check them out at Canna Business. Hey, you want to grow your own plants? Check out Style Lighting's Grow Kit. It is everything you need to become an expert home grower and bring the power of the sun indoors. Style Lighting uses TCP's high-powered commercial LEDs that deliver twice the output in the market. The Grow Kit has a grow bag, a timer, chains to hang the light, and of course the best. Coming up on Weed Talk News this week, a judge allows the Missouri adult use ballot question to remain on the ballot in November. Our Missouri correspondent, Brandon Jones, will have more on this big win for cannabis advocates. New York City lawmakers want the mayor to get tougher on the illegal sale of cannabis in the Big Apple. And the World Anti-Doping Agency will leave cannabis on its list of banned substances even after backlash from Sha'Carri Richardson's ban from the Olympics and the subsequent public outrage. Lobby days in D.C., Benzinga's business show in Chicago, Cannabis Science and Technology holds their conference in Baltimore as cannabis industrialists rally, while GOP prohibitionists attack the environmental impact on growing the plant medicine. All that and more on Weed Talk News next. Cannabis Media original content is supported by Salient Systems, your trusted name in video surveillance for the cannabis industry, and by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts' #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Accounting Buds, CPA services for the cannabis industry, and by stylighting.shop. Log on today to get your grow kit.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hey everyone, I'm Weed Talk News producer Tori Chamberlain in for Elena Pinto this week. We've been on a 2-week break to end the summer, but we are back to bring you the highest headlines and everything going on in the cannabis industry. So we want to start off with Missouri. Voters there are finally going to have legal weed on the November ballot after all. A recently filed lawsuit sought to keep the Legal Missouri 2022 initiative off the ballot after it was certified by the Secretary of State, and someone tried to challenge that. But this week, the state's Supreme Court said that that legal battle is over, allowing adult use cannabis to be up for a vote on the November ballot. But that's not the only piece of cannabis legislation that's trying to get on the bill. Our Missouri correspondent, Brandon Jones, has all the details in this week's Missouri Report.
Hey everybody, I'm Brandon Jones from Distribution Maven with Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. And that's right. This has been a pretty crazy roller coaster last couple months here in Missouri trying to get adult use on the bill. So the title of my story today is actually from Marijuana Moment. Missouri Marijuana Legalization Initiative will appear on November ballot after state Supreme Court rejects prohibitionist challenge. So as they were talking about here in the intro, yes, the Legal Mo Initiative, Amendment 3 got passed and put on the ballot after some fighting there. They thought it was short of signatures and then came back and got actually put onto the ballot. And then, yes, we saw this initiative coming out by a group here in Missouri to try to get it taken off. So Joyce Sweeney so affiliated with the Anti-Drug Coalitions of America, filed to take it off. So it went through 2 different courts, and then she tried to get it all the way to the Supreme Court with the help of the Colorado-based Protect Our Kids PAC. So they had a Colorado company come in and try to help support. They took it all the way to the Supreme Court, and this Tuesday they determined that the Supreme Court will not see this case. So Amendment 3 will stay on the ballot for adult use here in November. So all you people here in Missouri, please check out the amendment, go on, check out the bill, and let's see if we can get adult use passed here in Missouri. Yes, there are some things on the bill that should be addressed and changed, but at this point in time, we got to be very happy with where they're going. Again, I'm Brandon Jones from Distribution Maven with the Missouri Cannabis Report from Weed Talk News. Have a great week. Stay medicated and educated.
While we're still waiting for significant change when it comes to cannabis on Capitol Hill, a pair of GOP congressmen have introduced a new bill that we might want to pay attention to. They're asking key cabinet officials in the Biden administration to study the environmental impacts of growing cannabis, acknowledging both the intensive electrical demand that it takes to grow cannabis, as well as the role that legalization can play in setting regulations on that sort of thing. And another cannabis bill is brewing in the nation's capital as well right now. This as thousands of advocates descend on the nation's capital for the 10th annual Cannabis Industry Lobby Days. Vote Pro podcast Phil Adams has all of those details and much more from DC this week.
Hi, I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro podcast, here with the Weed Talk News DC report. More than 100 cannabis industry leaders and lobbyists descended on Capitol Hill this week to meet with lawmakers in a push for a long-sought marijuana banking bill. Organized by the National Cannabis Industry Association, stakeholders, including bipartisan sponsors in both houses of Congress, are ramping up their efforts in support of the Safe and Fair Enforcement Banking Act. The bill would protect financial institutions that serve state legal cannabis businesses from federal penalties. Current law forces legal cannabis businesses to operate entirely in cash, making them targets for criminal activity and preventing access to the same financial services enjoyed by other industries. Though it has passed the House in various forms 7 times, the Safe Banking Act has stalled in the Senate under both GOP and Democratic control. With comprehensive cannabis reform looking less likely to pass the Senate, the NCIA and its allies on the Hill are anxious to pass the standalone Safe Banking Act this year, before the midterms, if possible. A bill to enable small cannabis companies to compete with large canna corporations was introduced in the House this week. The Small and Homestead Independent Producers Act would give small companies the ability to sell and ship cannabis products directly to consumers, including across state lines. Introduced by Representatives Jared Huffman and Earl Blumenauer, the SHIP Act is designed to maximize opportunities for small farmers and producers once cannabis becomes federally legal. The bill addresses concerns that smaller businesses will struggle to compete with large, multi-state operators who possess the resources to dominate the market once prohibition ends. The Washington, D.C. Office of Employee Appeals has overturned the firing of a federal employee who was terminated after testing positive for cannabis in 2020. The employee, who is also a registered medical cannabis patient, petitioned the administrative court, saying she had been wrongly accused of being impaired on the job. While she admitted to using cannabis days earlier, she said she hadn't consumed any on the days when she was working. OEA Judge Monica Donji ruled that the Office of Unified Communications, where the employee worked, was negligent in how it initiated the referral for reasonable suspicion of impairment. Donji said that because the employee was allowed to continue to perform her duties and did so adequately, the OUC did not reasonably believe that her ability to perform her job was impaired. The OUC was also ordered to reimburse the worker for all back pay and benefits. That's the Weed Talk News DC report for this week. I'm Phil Adams. from Vote Pro Podcast.
But lawmakers and advocates still don't seem to be giving up hope on safe banking. Tina Spraga in Massachusetts is the former president of Gardner Federal Credit Union, which is the first credit union to bank with cannabis companies. She's now with Lighthouse Biz Solutions, but our team got to speak to her at NECANN last week. And while lawmakers may be now discussing the possibility of Safe Banking Plus, she says that's still not enough.
If we had the Safe Banking Act passed tomorrow, in our humble opinion, and I think Melissa agrees with me,
absolutely,
it does not mean that banking, the industry, becomes mainstream and every financial institution is going to bank the industry. I don't think that there's going to be a lot, if any, regulatory and compliance relief to financial institutions. If anything, we're a little concerned that there might be more, because now that we can acknowledge that banks and credit unions are banking the industry, then the burden could be on us to even give more information about the cannabis operators.
Social equity could be coming to the Bay State in the form of clearing cannabis convictions, which is huge news. A unanimous opinion recently issued by the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts clarifies a 2018 state law that provides judges with only limited leeway with respect to denying requests for cannabis-related expungements. Well, one attorney says that this new ruling means people with legitimate requests for those expungements will face fewer barriers to removing past convictions from their criminal records. A great step toward actual social equity here in Massachusetts. But the same forgiveness may not be given to our athletes around the world. The World Anti-Doping Agency is set to leave cannabis on its list of prohibited substances for 2023. This is despite the significant backlash that occurred when Sha'Carri Richardson was banned from participating just before the 2020 Summer Olympics, which I'm sure you all remember. Failing to remove cannabis from the prohibited substances list means that professional athletes who must adhere to that drug testing code will continue to be blocked from using medical or adult use cannabis, despite it being widely legalized now in several states and territories, and even now other countries around the world. You'll remember Sha'Carri Richardson was only 22 when this whole incident occurred with her, and she opened up and admitted to her use, saying she used it for emotional distress to deal with the death of her mother. A pretty solid reason to use cannabis, but still the World Anti-Doping Agency says those reasons are not legitimate, even if they come from a doctor. So unfortunately, they're not planning to lift any of those suspensions for anyone else, keeping the fate of athletes similar to that of Sha'Carri Richardson's from 2020. Meanwhile, in Maine, things have been a battle there, particularly for small cannabis companies. And now it looks like home delivery is the new front that's being fought for. Our new Maine correspondent, Rye Russell, has the details in our Maine report this week.
Hi, I'm Rye Russell from Bud's Emporium in Medway, Maine, with this week's Maine Cannabis Report with Weed Talk News. Adult use delivery is finally here in the state of Maine. Or is it? This past week, the Office of Cannabis Policy released its rules on adult use delivery, which would allow adult use retail stores the ability to offer home delivery to their customers. But what was once originally a very exciting prospect for retailers comes with the harsh reality of some over-regulation once again, with some operators saying they will refuse to offer delivery until the state relaxes on these policies. The most prohibitive of these policies is the requirements for delivery manifests for each delivery. So a consumer would be able to place an order online and a retail store would collect that order, package the product, and make the delivery. However, the state's rules and the use of metric, a tracking system, there's going to be a bottlenecked and inefficient process with potentially exuberant paperwork just in order to process a simple delivery. Additionally, delivery drivers are required to record their deliveries, something drivers and consumers could find to be rather intrusive. We'll continue to follow Maine delivery guidelines and policy updates right here on your Maine Cannabis Report. I'm Rye Russell from Bud's Emporium in Medway, Maine, reporting for Weed Talk News.
New York lawmakers have sent a letter to New York City's mayor, Eric Adams, urging him to clamp down on illicit sales going on in the city. The letter describes those businesses as, quote, unscrupulous entities that have taken advantage of not only New Yorkers, but the visitors and tourists to the city, taking advantage of the confusion that's going on with the transition of recreational sales happening in the Empire State right now. Now, in mid-August, the New York City Police Department actually seized a total of 19 vehicles that were owned by people accused of selling cannabis in Times Square illegally. 19 just in 1 month. So you can imagine that this is growing to be quite a problem. So now these lawmakers are telling the mayor that he needs to do something about it. Meanwhile, a media investigation in Pennsylvania is finding that the state's vague medical cannabis employment protections are causing confusion there as well for patients and employers alike. Claudia Post has that story and more in this week's Pennsylvania report.
Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'm here in the Keystone State, Pennsylvania, reporting for Weed Talk News. First up, it's very exciting that we have now in Pennsylvania implemented what they are calling the Pennsylvania Marijuana Pardon Project. It's an initiative and a coordinated effort for one-time large-scale pardoning of people with select minor nonviolent marijuana criminal convictions. Of course, yeah, let's clear out the prisons. It's ridiculous. The Pennsylvania Board of Pardons is accepting those applications now, and it will close on September the 30th. John Fetterman and Tom Wolf have initiated this, and it happened today, so it's pretty exciting. Now, representatives of the law enforcement community and, of course, the business community are seeking justice and reform. We are now implementing another landmark exciting program called the Pennsylvania Clean Slate. Let's call it expungement, which is even better. So what happens here is the records are sealed for an individual, again, with a low-level drug felony after 10 years with a criminal-free record after 10 years, of course. This is a crime-fighting measure. It is an important legislation that will help increase employment and other important opportunities for those with records. Because as an employer, I know that I employed prisoners in my warehouses. I felt very strongly about that. They were making their way through the system, and I feel like that's the right thing to do, to give people a second chance. So I did that. Now, the Pennsylvania medical marijuana industry is in upheaval. It's a mess here. Prices are plummeting. Consolidation is growing. Consolidation, of course, when I'm talking about multi-state operators gobbling up smaller companies, which is what we all feared. This is not a good thing. This is an industry that started with, mom and poppers. And why are we going to change the face of that? I have no idea, but I know that we're all in for a fight. The situation has spurred independent operators to call on the state to help with this, to help mitigate this, because it's putting people out of business. And of course, the prices of marijuana, as we all know, are plummeting. And that's a problem also. Well, that's another problem altogether. Anyway, those are the really big things that happened in Pennsylvania over this little bit of time. And I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'll be back next week to talk to you about what's hot and what's not in Pennsylvania. So from Weed Talk News, have a groovy week.
Another area seeing crackdowns on cannabis is Washington State. A recent investigation there reveals a couple of raids on local stores, and it turns out cannabis wasn't the only thing that they were keeping behind the shelves. Josh Kincaid has that story in our Washington report.
I'm Josh Kincaid from the Talking Heads with the Washington State Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Cannabis shops were raided in Washington State. According to the Cannabis Observer, following an investigation into unlicensed cannabis sales, Washington's Liquor and Cannabis Board, known as the LCB, entered 2 businesses that were subject to an investigation and seized 1,300 pounds of cannabis at the stores, including large quantities of cannabis concentrates and edibles. During the investigation, which began after multiple complaints alleged that the stores were selling cannabis without a license, the LCB undercover officers purchased illegal cannabis, including psilocybin mushrooms and peyote. So these stores were in fact a front for commercial drug dealing. They had no license and selling illegal psychedelics. Many of the cannabis-infused products would have been illegal to sell in the regulated marketplace, including products that were exceeding THC limits and products that were considered appealing to children. Both locations that were raided were also operating illegal cannabis clubs. And side note, it's a felony to maintain and operate a marijuana lounge or cannabis club. So the raids in Washington are surely going to cause ripple effects across the U.S. cannabis industry. Prosecutors said they were not going after patients, but employees were told that they would be subpoenaed to testify before a grand jury if the investigations move forward. Even if their raids are not a statement about the use of cannabis in Washington, they may have national implications. So even though cannabis is now legalized at the state level, seems to show the intent of regulators to continue to prosecute based on national draconian laws. Next week, you guys are going to find out more about Washington State's cannabis scene, but with that, we're going to have to roll up this Washington State Cannabis Report. I'm Josh Kincaid with the Talking Heads, reporting for Weed Talk News. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't, and I'm out.
So another event underway this week is Benzinga's Cannabis Capital Conference happening in the Windy City of Chicago. It's the 15th edition of this conference, and it's a 2-day event at the Palmer House Hilton this year. Attendees will be given an opportunity to broaden their network and listen to a who's who of keynote speakers in the industry. This is billed as the top cannabis conference in the world, where stars are made and deals happen. And a recent conference of this was actually the very site where Trulieve met the Harvest Health and Recreation team, which resulted in an acquisition deal worth more than $2 billion. So it may be worth your while to check it out. There's a new sheriff in town when it comes to cannabis in Michigan. And get this, he actually has a criminal law enforcement background. To see how that's going to work out and for more on what's going on in Michigan this week, here's Michigan Normal Executive Director Rick Thompson.
Hello again, everyone. This is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson for Weed Talk News. Let's begin. In the wake of the resignation of the director of the Michigan Cannabis Regulatory Agency, a new interim director was named on Thursday, September 15th. Mr. Hanna steps into the role previously filled by outgoing director Andrew Brisboe and will serve at the pleasure of Governor Whitmer until a new director is announced. Mr. Hanna is a law enforcement officer with the Michigan State Police and had previously served in the old Marijuana Regulatory Agency, but has been away from the game for a couple of years. The appointment of a state trooper is an unwelcome sign to many business owners and consumers in Michigan, as the MSP has traditionally not been on board with cannabis law reform. They still push their anti-scientific roadside swab testing for THC. Their state police lab just admitted they delivered false or misleading chemical lab results for decades when testing for THC and CBD. And they influenced the legislature to erase the rights and reforms granted by our 2 voter-directed initiatives. It is our hope that the governor will appoint someone more neutral in alignment to the permanent directorship. On Wednesday of this week, the regulatory agency held one of their quarterly public review meetings, and they asked respondents to focus on 3 separate topics: restricted ownership of cannabis cultivation and micro businesses, discontinuing the excess producer licenses, and placing a moratorium on issuing new cultivation licenses. Now, these issues are timely. Michigan's cannabis pricing has been in free fall for a long time, and we're flirting with $100 ounce pricing in many retail outlets. Responses to the moratorium fell along predictable lines.
the state's large producers are not in favor of a limitation, while the small cannabis entities feel a cap on licenses is necessary to ensure financial stability. The excess producer license is a hated creation of the old Marijuana Regulatory Agency and is widely despised. The ownership restrictions seem to fall at about 50-50 in support or opposed. What was more interesting were the additional issues raised by the in-person and virtual attendees at the review meeting. Now, they included complaints about the use of illegal immigrants as migrant workers, truckloads of cannabis distillate driving from processor to processor looking for someone to buy it, accusations of cannabis coming in from out-of-state markets and flooding Michigan's retail outlets, and the unique argument that certain processors are making more distillate than their supply of cannabis plants could logically produce. Blame was flung at the government, the illicit market, the regulatory agency, the big corporate giants, the government again. What is clear is that the nation's second largest cannabis market might be considered a mature market by American standards, but it still has a lot of growing pains left to work out. Michigan's cannabis sales during the month of August actually slipped 1% from their July record-setting highs. Now, the number was $208 million, which is $189 million in adult use sales and only $18.4 million in medical sales, which is the lowest number in years. When considered by themselves, adult use sales are actually up from July's number by a fraction of a percent. Year-to-date cannabis sales are $1.42 billion, and it's likely the state will hit $2 billion in sales during calendar 2022. And that's it for the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson for Weed Talk News.
And finally, another day, another new study blowing smoke in the stereotype of the lazy stoner. A new study published in the International Journal of Neuropsychopharmacology looked at data on 274 adults and adolescents who reported using cannabis 1 to 7 times a week for at least 3 months, so pretty regularly. What the researchers found was zero difference in apathy or reward-based behavior between those frequent weekly users and people who didn't use cannabis at all. So that pretty much puts the argument of the lazy stoner to bed. You can't tell us that that's the reason. And get this, frequent cannabis consumers, the researchers found, actually experience more pleasure as well in their daily lives than those who abstain from the plant. Who'd have thought? I think most of us who consume the plant probably could have told you that it brings a little bit more pleasure to life. But for those who might not have known, now you do, and there's science behind it. After all, it's a whole new world of weed out there, so keep using it wisely, everyone. For now, I'm Weed Talk News producer Tori Chamberlain. We'll see you next time.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are
Two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first. Hey, you want to grow your own plants? Check out Style Lighting's Grow Kit. It has everything you need to become an expert home grower and bring the power of the sun indoors. Style Lighting uses TCP's high-powered commercial LEDs that deliver twice the output in the market. The Grow Kit has a grow bag, a timer, chains to hang the light, and of course the best in the business lighting system by TCP. Check out stylelighting.shop for more information.